Welcome to a new video! Today I'm going to share with you my Fluffal deck profile. So Fluffal is a very cool deck, which I enjoy quite a bit. It's a very nice OTK deck that can also do things going first if you want to. And also it's my Five Nights at Freddy reference deck, which I really enjoy. So yeah, I really like this deck and I want to share with you what I built for them. And essentially, before we jump right into the video itself, I'm going to remind you that if you want to help the channel see more videos like this, please consider hitting the subscribe button, as also hit the like if you enjoyed the video, and let me know in the comments down below what do you think. But without further ado, let's jump right into the list itself. Alright, so one last thing I would say before I jump right into the list itself is that this is my going second version. I like to go with Fluffal's going second because I think this deck can just break boards quite nicely if you open up with a decent hand. So I prefer with these guys to go second, but there is a very important side deck for people who are interested in like seeing how to side for going first. So do keep that in mind because this side deck for this deck is very important unlike other side decks because you have a very specific way to side for going first. So if you're interested in that, stay for the end of the video because I'm going to talk about that a little bit because I think that's important. But without further ado, let's jump right into the list itself. And to start things off, we're going to start things with the triple copies of Penguin, the triple copies of Dog Boy, the double copies of Dolphin, and then the double copies of Bear, which is basically the only multiples of Fluffal monsters that I run, which I love every single card of these very much. They're also very cute. But the point is like all of these cards are very important to run. These 8 specifically because they're level 4s, they're good for your rank 4 plays, as well as just in general, they're the core of the deck. Bear essentially allowing you to get Toy Vendor, which is pretty good, and also it's a level 3, which is kind of important for the going first variant for this deck, which again we'll talk about in the side, as well for the fact that it's sometimes in a pinch you can normal summon this, or like summon this, tribute this, get a polymerization back from the graveyard. You don't always have to search a Toy Vendor with this, because Toy Vendor is important, but it's not like the most important thing in the world. Then, in the case of Dolphin, the reason why I decided to run this card at 2 and basically Wings at 1, spoiler warning, I run this card at 2 and Wings at 1. Basically, the reason for that is because this card is kind of like Wings, but better. Like, Wings is a card that just doesn't really do a whole lot. This still does something that even if you, like, use for a Frightful fusion summon, and like send to the graveyard, you at least get to shuffle a polymerization or fusion spell back to the deck, which is actually really good sometimes. So that's really nice for that. And also one thing to mention is like it's really easy to get Toy Vendor to the graveyard, and even if you don't get it like right now, you can leave this card on the field and then do that later and then gain an effect. Because one of the biggest things is that a lot of people don't realize that this effect doesn't trigger on normal special summon. This is an effect that you can trigger whenever you want to. It's kind of like Penguin. It's kind of like the same thing as that. It's like as long as it's on the field and you didn't activate the effect, you can activate the effect. And that's kind of like the entire purpose of this card. Very good, very important, and I like to run this card at 2. It just felt a lot more good now with Penguin, because if you open up with these two, this is a Bahamut chart, totally awesome play. And that's why I really like to have this as a 2 instead of like a Wings at 2. I felt just this card does more for the deck, just as a whole. And then Dog. Dog is your searcher of Fluffals and a gym. Sabers. Basically really cool. One thing to mention is that you only search if you have this in your hand, like summon it from the hand. If it's summoned from the graveyard, it doesn't work. Unfortunately, it's kind of like a stupid thing that they did with the early Fluffals. I don't really understand why, but that's kind of like something to mention. And then Penguin, the most important card in the deck. It's basically once when it's on the field and not a hard once per turn effect, so every time that you summon it back, you are able to summon another Fluffal from your hand to your side of the field. So if you summon this once, you summon the Dolphin, then you summon this somehow back with like a Cross Sheep, you get the effect to summon from hand again, which is pretty awesome. And then if this card is sent for the fusion summon of a Frightful monster to the graveyard, you get to draw 2 cards and discard 1. This card is absolutely insane. The best Fluffal monster in my opinion. And that's pretty much does it for these Fluffal monsters. And then for the one-off Fluffal monsters, we have the 1 copy of Owl, the 1 copy of Sheep, the 1 copy of Octo, 1 copy of Cat, and the 1 copy of Wings. These are the one-off Fluffal monsters. Owl is very good. If you're dealing with decks like have Imperial Orders and such, you are able to basically have Owl to kind of like normal summon it and not use its effect to search a polymerization spell, but still have the ability to fusion summon, which is actually very important to have as a card. So I like this card as a nice like one-off. Sheep is very good. Sheep is just a card just because of, it's just allowing you to activate your, get your Egypt's back from the graveyard if you need your chain back, and then like bounce something that you want back to your hand for a later turn. Very, very important card. The special summon from hand is not a harder once per turn, by the way. The only effect that from the once per turn is the effect to bounce and special summon the gem from hand or graveyard. This is the harder once per turn effect. And then in the case of Octo, this one is probably new for players, and a lot of players don't really know if to run this card. This card's actually pretty good. This is also a card that make 1-for-1 pretty good in this deck, because you can discard any Fluffal or any Jimp for 1-for-1, summon this directly from the deck, and get the card back to your hand, which is actually kind of stupid, which is really, really good. So, like, you're able to summon anything, like, get anything that you want to activate its effect to the graveyard, or just in general, like, you know, if you're in a pinch, you can summon this directly from the deck. And also, like, if you're in a pinch, you can summon this from the deck. But the point is, Octo is very, very good, and Octo is also the reason why you only run 1 Wings, because Octo, again, just like Dolphin and Penguin, if it's sent for the graveyard for the fusion summon of Frightful monster, you are able to retrieve 2 of your banished monsters and put them back into the graveyard, which is kind of cool. So you're able to return back your Wings and any other Fluffal monster to another turn play of your toy vendor, which is kind of cool. Cat is resource management for polymerization, and Wings, like I said, Wings is just important. But you only need 1, because Wings, like, if you draw into it and you don't have the ability to get to a graveyard, is actually kind of crappy. And especially if you don't have Toy Vendor, is also kind of crappy, and that's why we decided to run only the 1. But that's pretty much does it for the Fluffal monsters. And then for the Ejimps, I run triple copies of Ejimps Chain, double copies of Scythe, and the 1 copy of Sabers. Scythe is the only card that I'm kind of like considering maybe cut down to 1. But sometimes I kind of like, I really, really like the additional Scythe, because if I think I'm going second like game 1, but my opponent sometimes somehow force me going first, I still have some kind of like a weird interruption to my opponent. So that's kind of like the thought process behind that. Also, it's another Ejimp Chain, which you do need the additional name. The additional name of, like, you know, 5 sometimes is not enough, so the additional one of 6 is actually pretty important. And it's also another level 3, which is actually very, very important as well for your going first package, which, again, like I said, we're going to talk about it when we get to the side. But it's just a really, really good card as a whole, and it's also protecting your fusion monsters in the graveyard, which is kind of cool. Sabers is Sabers. You don't really need an introduction for this one. It's a card that you want to get to your graveyard, and it's just like, also because of Octo is even better, because you are able to retrieve it if it's banished, so that's kind of cool. And then Chain is the best Ejimp monster, because it's giving you fusions, your Frightful Patchwork or Frightful Fusion from your deck to your hand, or another card if you're going first. But that's pretty much does it for the monsters. Now we'll move on to the spells. No hand traps, because I just feel like this deck doesn't really like hand traps. There is another card that I feel a lot more impactful, which we'll talk about in the spells. But for the spells, triple Toy Vendor, triple Foolish Burial Goods, and triple Patchworks. I don't think I need to explain any of these. These cards are amazing, all and every single one of these. Frightful Patchworks is a lot more better now with the existence of Dolphin. Sometimes you are able to, like, you know, or should I say, cycle for all of your fusion spells or polymerizations, and then this card is dead. So having the Dolphin, being able to shuffle a polymerization back to the deck, keep this card live, which is really cool. And then you have Foolish Burial Goods, which send this to the graveyard, which then retrieve any monster, Fluffal monster, and an Ejimp Saber or an Ejimp Saber from your deck to your hand, which is really, really cool. This is your discard outlet if you need to discard your Chains, your Sabers, your other Toy Vendor. Very, very nice, very, very cool card. It's a shame sometimes that you just don't hit what you want to hit, but it is what it is. It's still a nice discard outlet for the deck, and just a Searcher that is not a harder once per turn, which is actually kind of stupid. And then for the other spells, for the other, like, you know, important spells, free polymerization, 1 Frightful Fusion, and 1 Frightful Repair. These are all really important. This one is for, what his name, Cruel Whale. You send this from the deck to the graveyard and serve as your, I guess, like, your Spiral Assault mission for the deck, because it's like, you banish this from graveyard, and then you're able to summon a Frightful, not Frightful, an Ejimp or a Fluffal monster from your hand to your side of the field, which is pretty cool. You don't really use it for its first effect ever. It's just a card that you want to send from your hand to the graveyard. And worst case scenario, if you draw into it, you can discard this with a Toy Vendor or whatever and get this to the graveyard. Frightful Fusion, just a very, very good fusion spell. You can retrieve it back with Dolphin, so you don't need to run more than 1. And it's your other card to search beside Patchworks. And then Polymerization is just a very, very important card. I've seen some people run this card at 2, which I don't really understand. Specifically in the going second version, I think like 3 of this is absolutely mandatory, because this card is really, really important. It's like your primary fusion spell. and you want to see a fusion spell in your hand. And sometimes, like, you know, Owl and Patchworks are not enough. So having 3 copies of this is actually pretty important. And yes, there is the problem that sometimes you open up with like 2 or 3 of these in your hand and nothing else. It is a shame that sometimes that happened, but I'd rather see like 2 of these in like a still playable hand than not seeing any of these in my hand most of the time. Because like this is kind of like a very important fusion spell for the deck, because it's the original fusion spell that's kind of like the core fusion spell for the deck. Regardless, that's pretty much it for that. And then for the last 5 cards, 3 Super Poly, 1 Duster, and 1 1-for-1. 1-for-1 I already mentioned. We have 3 targets that you can summon. Most of the time it's either going to be Octo or Wings, depending on the situation, and I think like the one-off copy is pretty good. Harpy Feather Duster is another way to deal with back row decks. You technically already have Tiger, but for the off chance that you do need this exists. And you can draw into it, so it's kind of like not really need more than like, you know, 1 copy of Deal with Back Row. And yes, like even if like your opponent deal with you, like you only need this. I don't think like I need to run heavy back row removal. I think 1 is just enough because I don't really see a whole lot of Sky Strikers, but I still see them from time to time that I want this card in my hand sometimes. And then Super Polymerization, just the best card to break boards. Like the more common boards with Dragoons, so I felt like it's just... Like, Dragoon is still the most annoying card for this deck to deal with, so Super Polymerization is just a really good card to deal with that. And that's pretty much does it for the main deck. Also, one last thing that I forgot to mention before we jump right into the extra deck is that Super Polymerization, worst case scenario, actually can serve as a fusion spell. It's not the best fusion spell, but it can. So that's one last thing I forgot to mention about that. But now we can move on into the extra deck. And for the extra deck, I do run the 2 copies of Tiger, the 2 copies of Whale, the 1 copy of Sabertooth, and then the 1 copy of Kraken. This is the fusion monster lineup I decided to go with for the Frightful monsters. I felt like this is more than you need. I technically wanted to run a 3rd copy of Whale or also a Wolf, but I came to the conclusion that this is kind of like all you need for grind game. These are all very important. Tiger is just a card that you can summon a lot more easier now with the Greater of Ease. It's also like a really good OTK enabler because this card just like increase all of your monsters for 300 attack for each Frightful or Fluffal monster on the field. This can become big very quick and like making all of your monsters really big. So with this and Sabertooth by itself is like 600 attack boost, and with the Sabertooth increase is like become 1000 for both of them, which is kind of like stupid. And also like sometimes you summon 1 and your opponent kind of like, you know, stop you. So you use the Frightful Fusion, and then you summon the second one by using the same materials from the graveyard, and then like you summon the second one, and then that's kind of pop off. Because the only stop for this card is like, you know, you cannot control 2. You can still use the effect to pop the entire field twice. It just, you can only control 1 at a time. So that's kind of like the big thing about this card. Cruel Whale, very good card. Honestly, kind of like my favorite fusion monster here. It's a very nice card to kind of like help you pop off with your assault mission of the deck, which is... Frightful, I forget what the name of that, Frightful Repair, so that's kind of cool, and also you can become big really quick with his own effect. Sabertooth, just a really great card, helping you, like, you know, fusion summon with a Cruel Whale or a Tiger, you summon them back, and you're getting yourself, like, a monster that boosts all of your monsters by 400. And also, this is a very annoying card for, what's their name? Prank Kids to deal with if you use free materials, so that's also a pretty good card for that. And then Frightful Kraken is just a very good card to just help you break boards again, so this card is really cool. And most of the time, like, you are summoning Kraken and then summoning your Sabertooth and you're getting rid of 2 monsters, and then you continue on for your plays. It really depends, but yeah, that's kind of like the entire point. And that's pretty much does it for those. This is all the lineup of Frightful monsters I felt like I need. And then for the other 2 fusion monsters, these are for Super Poly. Obviously, Starving Venom is the more common one, but this has also come up depending on the situation. And also in the side, I do run the one to deal with, what's their name again? Cybers, but, you know, I'm not always need to deal with Cybers, and these are the more 2 common ones to deal with. But that's pretty much does it for the fusions. Then for the Xyz, Bahamut Shark, Abyss Dweller, Dugaris, and Totally Awesome. These are really good. These 2 are, like I mentioned, they're part of the package of, like, you know, trying to summon Penguin plus Dolphin, so kind of like giving you the ability to deal with Nibiru, and it's also just a nice interruption as a whole. Abyss Dweller, you have, again, water monsters. It can increase your other water monsters by 500, which is also really good for OTK sometimes, but just in generally helping you deal with Graveyard Effect. And then Dugaris, if you're able to summon this, and you have something like even a Kraken or something, and like you broke your opponent's board, you can just like attack twice and for game or something, or just in general, like you have like the ability to attack twice and just helping you deal with damage, or just draw and discard is also very, very important. So Dagaris can get you out in a pinch, which I really, really like as a card. So Dagaris, very, very important card. And yeah, these are all very excellent for what they do. These are like I said, Nibiru. This one is just dealing with specific decks, and this one is just very, very nice in a pinch, or just for OTK purposes. And then for the last 3 cards for the extra, the 1 Barricade Blocker, the 1 Cross Sheep, and then the 1 copy of Appaloosa, Bull of the Goddess. Cross Sheep is obviously self-explanatory. This is a fusion deck. You can use this card pretty easily. You summon under it a Cruel, and then you get back your Dolphin or something, and then get another free special summon from hand, which is really good. Barricade Board Blocker, very, very good option if you don't really have so much like the best hand for fusion, so it's at least able to kind of like discard, I don't know what happened to this card to like falling from my hand, but it's able to help you discard, for example, an Egypt Chain, Toy Vendor if you need to, and then it can also retrieve Toy Vendor during the end phase, which is kind of funny. But the point is, like, this card is really, really good, and it's also just a really, really nice link to, which then, if you need to and you are forced going first, or just in generally, like, you're not able to OTK your opponent, but you're still able to build a board, you sometimes like going to this, and then going to this, and then you link them off to this. Or you just, you know, make 3 negates Appaloosa. I feel like the Appaloosa is just really nice if, like, I know most of the time in my deck I want to go second, but if my opponent just, like, force me to going first because they have their deck that going second, at least I have something to deal with them. So that's why I like to have this package very, very much. But that's pretty much does it for the deck and does it for the deck profile as a whole. And now, without further ado, we're going to jump right into the side because, like I said, the side have a very, very important interactions and like something to explain because the side deck for going first is actually very, very important to explain to you guys. So now let's jump right into it. Alright, so side deck. Like I said, the side deck is actually very, very important. Now, the idea for the side deck itself, like for these seven of these 8 cards, which I'm going to talk to you about right now, is actually the idea for it is not coming from me. But I did also decided to tweak in and add the additional Tornado Dragon just because I felt like it's add for the consistency of this package quite even more for going first. And this package is as such. You have the 3 copies of Necrofusion, the 1 copy of Lilith, the 1 copy of Frightful Meissner, and then the 1 copy of Artifact Scythe. And then for the extra deck, you have Artifact Dagda and Tornado Dragon for the 8 cards. And the entire point of this package is that you either, like, you know, use Ejim Scythe from your hand if you have to fusion summon, or use Tornado Dragon if you don't have the ability to see into the Necrofusion to essentially fusion summon during the like to have a pop for your Artifact Scythe, which you're going to try to set to your side of the field, which is kind of like the entire package. And then the other option is, like, you know, you have the Frightful Meissner, which basically able to either tribute your bear or your Ejim Chains, or whatever, to summon a Lilith from the deck, which then can get you 1 of your copies of Necrofusion, or Necrofusion itself, which then use cards from the graveyard to then summon during the opponent's turn, to then pop Artifact Scythe. That's kind of like the entire idea of this package. You switch cards around, like Super Polymerization and cards that you don't need, and then you put these 6 cards and then take the 2 Super Poly targets and add the Tornado Dragon and Dagda. And the additional addition of Tornado Dragon actually felt to me even more powerful, because having the additional copy of Tornado Dragon just, like, how should I say this? Helped quite a bit, because sometimes you're not able to get to your Meissner, you're not able to get into Necrofusion, so having the additional copy of, like, a rank 4 that you can make that can still pop for you a card, even if your hand is not the best, and buy you a turn, is very, very good. So these 8 cards are the 8 cards that you want to side going first. And then for the additional 7 cards, these can be whatever you want to, but for what I decided to go with 3 copies of Droll and Lockbird, 3 copies of Diddy Crow, and then 1 copy of Chimera for the Cybers matchup. And the Droll and Lockbird and, what's his name? The Diddy Crow is just dealing with Drytrons and Sky Strikers, which I find the most frustrating. But these 7 spots can be whatever you want to, but the 8 spots that I mentioned before, I recommend to test with them. If you don't like this entire package, you can play with it around. But I think going first is just really, really nice to have a guaranteed to get into an Artifact Scythe, which is pretty easy to get. And Frightful Meissner is searchable by, what do you call it, either... it's searched by a Ejim Chain, which is kind of cool, and a Ejim Chain is searchable of a card. It is a shame if you get this card to your graveyard, or you discard the Lilith, or draw into the Lilith, but it is what it is, and you still have the 3 copies of Necrofusion, which is not that bad, and like I said, like the additional copy of Tornado Dragon in the side deck really helps as well, because, you know, sometimes you're getting into these little problems. So that's actually quite important to mention. And also one thing to mention is that, like, technically, you can summon Dagda and set a Necrofusion, and then do activating. When you activate Necrofusion as a quick effect, you can immediately set the artifact Scythe and then pop it with the fusion monster that you summon if you have those two monsters in the graveyard for the fusion summon of what you want to. So just going to mention, that's also technically an option, but mostly you're going to try to set with Dagda before you use the Necrofusion during the opponent's turn. That's kind of like the entire idea. But yeah, that's pretty much does it for that. And now for the next deck choices. For the next deck choices, I'm going to bring out once again the options from last week. I'm still giving another last chance to choose from each and every single one of these what you want to see more. Right now, technically, Dragunity is leading, but everything can change depending of what you want specifically. But that's pretty much does it for the video and does it for the deck profile as a whole. So hope you enjoyed the deck as a whole. Unfortunately, not test hands or what are they called? Combos, because this deck really depending on the cards that you draw in test hands. I don't really have the time or power to deal with those. I don't really like to deal with test hands as a whole. I like more set of combos because I think these are better. But yeah, that's pretty much does it for that. So hope you enjoyed. Don't forget, creativity is the key in this game. Have a good day, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.